Hi there, Sandra here from Createinspain. I've been making fans over the last few days. I have created a set of files which I will link down below, and there are a couple of notes on the work surface of the file so that you don't cut things that you're not supposed to. I wouldn't advise changing the sizes by scaling it. It just doesn't work that way. It's one of those files that scaling just isn't very good for. So there is a file for a 16 centimeter stave, the stave being the spines basically. There is one for a 19 centimeter one and another one for a 30, I think it's a 30 centimeter stave. And so those files are in SVG format, and I've also given you the shortcut slot file. So you can make the staves. You can make them from wood if you've got access to the right size popsicle sticks. If you've got a laser, you can make your own staves, no problem, because that's what lasers do rather well, as long as you can get the right thickness of wood. Now, generally speaking, the lollipop stick versions are 2 millimeters thick, and that works just fine. I didn't have any wood that was that thin, so I kind of cannibalized lollipop sticks and a bamboo mat to make them the length that I wanted. You'll see more of that a bit later on. So with fans, you have a choice as to how many staves you want to use. It's personal preference, it's how you want your fan to look, and it might also depend on how big you're making your fan. Bigger fans tend to have more staves than smaller ones. For obvious reasons, they need more support. But all it is a piece which has got a hole in it at one end. Now that hole in all cases on all my file pieces is 2 centimeters up from the bottom of the stave. That being the bottom, that being the top. So it can be just a straightforward strip. These are 6 millimeters wide, and I've got other ones which are a whole centimeter wide, but I probably wouldn't go any wider than that. So I've also given you in the file paper cutting for the actual fan base, and there are pink lines there to show you where to put the staves if you are using the same number of staves that I use in that particular piece. And when I say positioning of the staves, I mean it goes up the center of the stave. So when you're positioning it, where you have a line, you put the stave over the center of that line. Now, if you wish to, you can do a decor panel one for the outside edges. I have given you a basic decor panel, but it will depend on how many staves you are using as to the shape of the panel. The less staves you are using, the wider that decor panel has to be, because the more staves, the narrower this is. And obviously, if you're doing a decor panel, you want it to cover there. So to be perfectly honest, I think it's probably easier to make a fan without them. And then if you want to, you can measure one and you can stick it on to that part of the stave afterwards and do whatever design, decorative bits you want to do. Just do it from there to there and just stick it on the outside edges. That's the easiest way of doing it. So this one was a failure because my card wasn't thick enough. Not this bit, this is just A4 printer paper. The staves are made, in this particular case, from a very light card, and although I put 2 layers of it together, it's not really heavy enough. Whereas this one was a heavier card. It was the Aldi card that they sold you. It's a good, I think, 270 gram card, and that worked quite nicely with just 2 layers. With this card, I really should have had 3 or 4 because it wasn't really sufficient. This one I want to show you because this has a decorative edge. And you might be thinking, oh, great, I can put a decorative edge on the inside of my shape. Yes, you can, but you must remember to shorten your staves to accommodate it, because obviously you don't want them showing through any holes if you've got a lacy edge. So yes, in your file, if you want to, you can do a nice pattern on the inside, but shorten your staves to make sure that they don't get in the way. So this is a piece of crepe paper. Crepe paper does actually work for a fan, probably not for a small one, but this is quite a large one. But it is quite difficult because of the grain in it to fold things in this. So when it comes to making it up, crepe paper wasn't the easiest choice to go for. I got it because I couldn't find any paper big enough other than the crepe paper. But this is the fan that I made from it, and I rather like this one. All I did was I used a stencil and silvery, goldy coloured acrylic markers to put a pattern on it, and I really quite like this one. I did an edge on it as well and around there, and I really quite like this. It's also very efficient as a fan goes. This one wafts rather well, but it was a real pain in the neck to fold it up. When you fold them up, you've got your fan glued together. You let it dry, and then you fold it up by putting one stave over the one underneath it. And you do that time and time again. Now I can do it quite easily now with this one, but when I actually made it, it was really, really stiff and it didn't want to fold. So not the easiest thing to do. Right, so the next thing you need to know is about putting the staves on. When you glue them on, if you do it from the wrong side, you work from the bottom stave to the top stave. Don't put one in the middle and then do the sides, because it's really hard to do that. Go from the bottom, glue your bottom one down, just decide where it's going to be. You don't always end up wanting to do a full 180 degrees. You might decide you want it a little bit less than that. In this particular case, I wanted one less than 180, but your best bet is to go with one of the patterns that I've given you and then transfer that pattern to your paper or fabric, whatever it is that you're making your fan from. What I'm going to show you now is how to mark out your fabric or your paper if you haven't been able to do it by machine. Okay, so not everyone has got a cutting machine, not everyone could, for example, make something big enough on that cutting machine. So I've got a scrap piece of paper that has a straight edge. So this was as it came out of the stock, as it were. And I just folded a line through the middle. I've got my fabric or my paper, and I've also folded a line down the middle of that. And then what I want to do is to put it down the middle of that piece of paper, and I want to line this edge because this is a full 180 degrees, okay, like that, with the bottom. Now you can use a piece of tape to keep it in place, because it's important that this doesn't shift while you're working out where your staves are going to go. Alright, so just do that, and that's just going to stick it in place for the time being. So there's a couple of things which you might have. You might have a stave, if you've got an odd number of staves, you'll have a stave that goes right the way up the middle. Yeah, not much of a problem. In this particular case, it's about 24 centimetres from there. You would need a 26 centimetre stave with a 2 centimetre gap between the bottom and the hole in order to make that point there your pivot point. Everything has to rotate from that pivot point, not down here. It rotates from there. That's where your wire is going through. That's where your sequin is going to be. That's where it rotates from, and it's important to realise that it's not down here. I know it's tempting to think it's down there, but it isn't. That is your pivot point. And that's why it's really handy to have a contrasting piece of paper and a contrasting pencil even would be handy, so that you know exactly where you're going. So if you're going to have a central stave, all very well and good, that is your starting off point. How do you decide how to break it up, how many staves to have? Well, it's really a matter of personal preference, whether you want something which is very close together, like this, in which case you've got more staves, or whether you want something which isn't as close together. And one of the things that you can do is use household objects in order to do it. If you think, for example, you want the gap between your staves to be like this, I could use this bottle. So I would mark there, put my mark there, another mark, another mark, another mark, etc. And I would draw lines from there to there. On the other hand, I could do them much more closely together by finding something with a smaller circumference, or even just measuring with a ruler. Say, oh, maybe I want, that was about 6 now, maybe I want about 5 centimetres between each one. So mark one off at 5, take your mark from 5, go down to the pivot point and draw your line. And that is how you're going to mark your staves on. Now you will invariably find, unless you've calculated it by mathematics and you've calculated the angles and you've used a protractor, that you've got a bit left at the end. So the number of staves you're going to have will alter according to how many gaps you can actually fit in without running out of space, in which case you do your last one and you just go from there to your pivot point. Don't trim off your excess until your fan is made, because you might just trim it a bit too close. So make your fan, get it all dry before you trim it off, and then you shouldn't have too much difficulty. So that is probably the easiest way to get your staves at regular intervals, which is important for it to fold up properly. So piece of paper underneath it so that you've got something to go by, and then you can go around and you can manually mark it without too much difficulty. Personally, I prefer to do it on my machine, but if I'm doing something which is too big, then obviously you've got to do it by hand. If you are doing it on a cutting machine, you might have limits to, for example, how big your mat is or whatever. I do have one in the file which is the biggest that you can get onto a 12 by 12 piece of paper. Now when it comes to putting the staves together, it is pretty simple. It's a wire doubled up, put through from one side to the other. On both sides, I put a couple of sequins, simply to make sure that my wire wasn't going to go straight through one way and out the other and fall out. So double over the wire, put a couple of sequins on it so that you've got a little loop, you probably see it on this side, a little loop of wire, put your sequins on, put it through your staves. Doesn't make any difference if they are wood or card, whatever they are. Put another couple of sequins on the other side. This time butterfly the wires, trim off the excess, and then all I did was I put some UV resin over the top to make it all nice and smooth and comfortable to hold. So you might be looking at my staves and thinking, oh, those are a bit fancy. These are lollipop sticks that you get in the craft stores, which are 18 centimetres. But I couldn't find, normally I can get, but I couldn't get the very long ones. So I had to modify them. So I laser cut a slit and put a piece of bamboo in. When needs must, that's what happens. This one has been drying for a little while. I made it earlier this afternoon. This one, as you can see, has got more staves in it, and it was a pain in the neck to do for the simple reason I didn't transfer the markings to the fabric. I had to eyeball it. That is not a good position to be in, believe me. But one thing that I did find was useful, and you might want to have this as a tip. When I was putting my staves, paper flying around here. When I was putting my staves in position, what I did was I put these clips onto the fabric and marked, okay, I'm going to go under there now. I marked where I thought they needed to go, and I put all the staves to the left of the clips. And this was really great because I could then pick up whichever stave I needed to use and then set it down, get them all in the right position, all around with the clips, and then I could glue them one at a time and get them set where they're supposed to be. But go from the left to the right, make sure you've got them in the correct order. I very nearly glued down one from here in the position over here, and that would have completely wrecked the entire thing. So you work from the bottom to the top one. Don't get them mixed up. Believe me, that is more hassle than you want. So I've not folded this one up yet. Oh, fingers crossed this is going to work. As I said, I did eyeball it, I didn't measure it. So this is how it goes. One stave over the next, like so. Now this is a lot easier to fold up than the paper ones are, I can tell you that much. I quite like it from that point of view. What I do need to do with this is to put some glue around the outer edge to stop it from fraying. Once I've done that, I think what I'm going to do is decorate the fabric a bit more, maybe with a silver pen. So that's how it goes. And again, what I'm going to do is make a decorative piece for this so that it hides this section here and this side here. I've got it so that it's stretched out and it's not too wrinkly or anything. Let's give it the all-important test. Yeah, it wafts quite nicely. So that's it. I hope you give it a go. And as I said, at the moment it's about 33 degrees, I think, outside. It's pretty warm inside as well. And I definitely need a fan or two at the moment. Hope you've enjoyed it. I'll see you again soon. Take care. Bye.